Shabbat Shalom. And first, let me say Mazel Tov to Jim and Joe. May you have many more wonderful years together and many more wonderful simchas that we can celebrate, but celebrate in person. What does it mean to be Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel? We grapple with this question. What does it mean to be Jewish? What is required of us as Jews? And I'm not talking about the 613 commandments, but on a meta level. What does it mean to be a Jew in the world? And what does that represent for us personally, communally, and to the outside world? It is this question that the rabbis set out to answer, at least begin to formulate a process for thinking about it when they began the Talmudic project, which for our purposes here and for us today is ongoing. We can go back and forth with various Torah portions as the ones that best provide an answer to this question, or at least the answer we most like. But any discussion on this question must begin here in Genesis chapter 32 and with our third patriarch, Jacob. Jacob is endlessly compelling and completely human, known as much for his moral failings as for his triumphs. He's a twin who literally is reaching for more while still in the womb. He at best thoughtfully arranges a deal to take the birthright from his older brother, and at worst, schemes to manipulate a possibly vulnerable brother into giving him that birthright for a bowl of lentil soup. Must have been some mighty good dal. He creates an elaborate scheme along with his mother Rebekah to deceive his father Isaac into giving him the blessing of the firstborn. Not a lot so far to be proud about, but he appears to be a very loving husband, even to his first wife, who he married against his will. Despite being what looks like an indentured servant to his uncle and father-in-law, Lavan, for the better part of 2 decades, he conducts himself the entire time in an upright manner. And beyond these personal interactions, he has a relationship with God that I find most easy to identify with relative to his father and grandfather before him. His prayers look transactional, his belief tenuous and conditional. But is that not more relatable? Is that not a patriarch or a prophetic voice we could emulate? Maybe, if we're even being honest, look up to more. Jacob did not hear voices and follow them regardless of the ramifications. He needed God's protection. He needed to know that God was more than an idea. And this brings me to the mysterious man Jacob encounters in the night as he was alone. Jacob, or Yaakov, means the heel grabber, as he was grasping his brother's leg in the womb. And now the emotional and physical wrestling that has characterized his life literally comes to a wrestling match. The Torah simply describes his opponent as an Ish, a man that we know is an angel, but that is entirely unknown to Jacob as this man attacks him in the darkness of the night. The messenger of God permanently injures Jacob by seemingly ripping his hip socket out of place. But Jacob gets the best of him, which causes him, the angel, to change Jacob's name to Israel, meaning the one who has striven with God and won. And this brings us back to my earlier question. Since from this moment and ever since, we have been known as the children of Israel. And now we know what that name means. But if we are named Israel, what's with Jacob? How do we reconcile these two characters that are one, especially since the Torah will continue to go back and forth by calling him Jacob sometimes and other times Israel? And it's this confusion that I think is the point. We may be ambivalent about the moral leadership and significance of the earlier matriarchs and patriarchs, but the Torah does not seem to be. Yet I think the Torah is conflicted about Jacob. We love that our heroes are flawed, real, and not just something a bit shy of being a deity. But Jacob was greatly flawed. Yet, are we not all flawed? If our story was under the same biblical microscope, would we not make some of the same mistakes? Have we ever thought about what our life would look like if we had Maimonides and Rashi commenting on our every move? I hope we would not make the same mistakes, but I'm sure we have and will continue to do so. Jacob is a real name given to a real human being, but Israel is an aspiration. It is a potential to reach for that divine level, and it's a responsibility. I think politicians too often reach for Lincoln's words when they summon or reference our better angels. Yet for us, that may be precisely what it means to be Jewish, to reach for the divine image that has formed our imprint, to bear a responsibility that more often than not feels like a burden that we want to hide from. Yet that is our legacy. That is what we need to model. That is what we need to strive for. And yes, we need to do it individually, but also create communities that allow each other to be held up to those daunting heights. Jacob's struggles were external, but Israel is the inner wrestling match that, when bested, makes each of us and the world better. And rather than limping away, we make the world more whole. Shabbat Shalom.